Suppose that a young man, say 20 years old, came to you and said, I am thinking about getting married, and I would like your advice. What should I look for in a wife? What would you say? I have often said that when I'm speaking, I would love to pass out 3x5 cards and have everybody write down the answer and then me read them. This is one of those occasions. I would really like for us to have a discussion. I would love to know what you would say a young man ought to look for in an ideal wife. But since I didn't do that, I did some looking. One quote I found said, "Love and honesty are the things that make a good wife and mother." That's not bad. Daniel Boone, you remember him? And let me tell you what he said. Daniel Boone said, all you need for happiness is a good gun, a good horse, and a good wife. But one of my favorites was Milton Berle, who said, a good wife always forgives her husband when she is wrong. Now, it sounds like I have just eliminated half the audience, right? Because if I'm going to talk about the ideal wife, then I've eliminated all men and women that aren't married. So let me clarify something. Everybody needs to hear what the book of Proverbs says about the ideal wife. As a matter of fact, if you are a single man contemplating getting married, this is for you. If you are a single woman thinking about getting married someday, this is for you. If you are already married and you're a wife, then you really need to hear this. If you're a husband and already married, it's too late. However, as I will point out at the end of this message, everything I'm going to say really applies to all of us to some degree, one way or another. But there are some things in this passage that really apply to all of us, and the book of Proverbs makes that clear. So, with that in mind, turn to Proverbs chapter 31. In the King James Version, this is called the virtuous woman. But it's very obvious from reading the passage that she is married. So we're going to talk about that. As a matter of fact, the New King James, from which I'm reading, says in verse 10 of chapter 31, who can find a virtuous wife? For her worth is far above rubies. So the King James and the New King James calls this the virtuous wife or virtuous woman. The Hebrew word that's translated virtuous is really difficult to get your arms around. It can be translated strength, efficiency, ability. It often involves moral worth, which is where I suspect they get the idea of virtuous. But I think the best translation is excellent. As a matter of fact, in Proverbs 12:4, it is translated excellent. So I said this was the virtuous, and I've said that's the ideal wife. I really prefer the term that it is the excellent wife. And I'm choosing that term because I think it is comprehensive and it includes all those other attributes that I have mentioned. So let's think of this as the excellent wife with all of its nuances. She is strong, capable, virtuous. Such a wife is diligent, worthy. One commentator calls us the ideal wife. Another says she's the truly lovely wife. Another says she's the noble wife. And another says she has noble character. But the point I would like to settle on is that this is introducing to us an excellent wife. And I'm using that word to encompass all those other little nuances that are embedded in this Hebrew word. Now, notice what verse 10 says. For she is worth far more than rubies. You find this kind of a wife, and you have found something that is very, very valuable. As a matter of fact, the way this is stated, it seems to imply it's kind of difficult to find this kind of a wife, frankly. Who can find this kind of a wife? They apparently are rare. At any rate, if you do, this excellent wife is more valuable than rubies, which is simply another way of saying she's invaluable. One has said, he who gets such a wife gets what is incomparable, better than the greatest amount of wealth, greater than the richest precious stones and jewels. The idea being, you are really well off if you can find this kind of a wife. All right, that's who we're talking about. What does this chapter say about such a wife? Well, the first thing it says is that she takes care of her husband. We're going to go through this passage verse by verse. So look at verse 11. The heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. These first two verses are talking about the fact that she takes care of her husband. The first thing is he trusts her, which is the point of verse 11. The second half of the verse indicates that he trusts his wife with the management of affairs. So the first part of the verse says, the heart of the husband trusts her, so they have no lack of gain. And the idea is that he trusts her with handling money. How many husbands complain about the fact that their wives don't handle money properly? Well, the excellent wife... I didn't ask for the raise of hands, but I got it. But the excellent wife is able to handle money properly. So he can put his purse in her trust, is sort of the idea. He can trust her with financial affairs. Someone has said, he will not be worried that his wife will be extravagant, contract debt, squander money, disgrace him, or ruin him. Martin Luther said, the greatest gift of God is a pious, amiable spouse who fears God, loves his house, and with whom one can live in perfect confidence. So, she takes care of her husband. She takes care of him financially so that he doesn't have to worry about that. He trusts her in that area. Verse 12 says, beyond just the finances, she does him good, not evil, all the days of her life. So she does good and not evil. In other words, it's not a mixed bag. She doesn't do good sometimes and evil sometimes. She does good, not evil, and she does it all the days of her life. So she's consistent and it's permanent. In every situation, all the days of her life, she is doing her husband good. One commentator said, she studies his character. She makes herself aware of his particular tempers and humors, his likings and his dislikings, in order that she may, as far as possible, from ability and from principle, accommodate herself to them, seeking in all things to please and gratify him. She devotes herself to the advancement of her husband's honor and reputation, his wealth, body, and mind, his substantial interest, his temporal and spiritual benefits, and of course, the benefit of the family. Now, I can imagine someone hearing this and thinking the book of Proverbs is being sexist and all kinds of criticisms that comes against the scripture because of what it says about the wife. Well, let me just quickly add that the New Testament says that the husband is to love his wife and love his wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. So this is not a one-sided proposition. If you take what the scripture says, granted the wife is serving the husband, but the husband is sacrificing himself for the wife because that's how Christ loved us. So this is not lopsided biblically if you take everything it says into consideration. All right, so the first thing is she takes care of her husband. The second thing is she takes care of the house. Look at verse 13. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. She is like the merchant ship. She brings her food from afar. She also rises while it is yet night, provides food for her household and a portion for her maidservant. Oh, that's interesting. In other words, she provides and takes care of the house. Verse 11 is saying she makes her own clothes. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. And the little word translated willingly has the little nuance of she does it with delight. It's her pleasure. She enjoys it. Now, in the context of the ancient world, this would almost be expected. Among the Greeks and even the Romans, as certainly among the Jews, the women automatically made the clothes. There was no J.C. Penney or other kind of store you could run down and buy them, so it was, she did that. So in the context of the ancient world, that was what was done. So this is the excellent wife, and she makes her own clothes. Verse 14 says she provides food. Only look at what it says. She's like a merchant ship. She brings her food from afar. So she goes shopping, and she doesn't buy the same thing every time. She's got some creativity in this area. So whatever the ships are bringing in, she tries some new dishes. So she is interesting and unusual and fascinating in the way she prepares meals. But what is really interesting is verse 15 says, she rises while it is yet night. She's full of energy. She's very busy. She provides food for her household and a portion for her maidservant. Now notice, and it says maidservants, plural. She has maidservants. And yet, she is making the food, and not only for the family, but for them. So this is like the mother who gets up before everybody else and makes the lunches for the kids as they go off to school after she even fixes breakfast. So she provides food for the family. And she does it for the maidservants who are supposed to be serving her. Now, it seems to me that this is talking about providing for the household. But it's talking about she's full of energy. She gets up, she rises before the sun rises. She's organized. She's industrious. So this is a busy little girl. Now, as a matter of fact, the next thing the passage says is just that. Look at verse 16. It says, she considers a field and buys it. From her profit she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and strengthens her arms. She perceives that her merchandise is good and her lamp does not go out by night. She stretches out her hands to the distaff, and her hand holds the spindle. Now, these verses are saying, in essence, this is one hard-working lady. She not only works at home, she owns a business. Look at verse 16. She considers a field and she buys it. And from her profit, she makes a vineyard. Now, this is obviously what happened in the ancient world, but if you were going to put this in modern context, and what would be the modern parallel? She opens a business. She sees this field, she buys it, she obviously plants it, and she's good at it because she makes a profit, and from that she expands and she buys a vineyard. So after making a profit, she purchases a vineyard that brings in more money. So when I say this is an excellent wife, I mean she's excellent in just all kinds of ways. Her husband, the household, and now she has a business on the side. She is very active, to say the least. But it seems to me that verse 16 says she has a business mind. Business enough to go into business and business enough to make money at it. And she works hard at it. That's verse 17. She girds herself with strength and strengthens her arms. And the idea is that not only is she active, but she's energetic. She's full of vigor and enthusiasm. She strengthens herself. She strengthens her arms. She goes at it with vigor. And verse 18 says, she perceives that her merchandise is good, that her lamp does not go out at night. She looks over the situation and she says, this is working. Now keep in mind, the passage has already said she gets up in the morning, right? Now it's telling us, and she stays up late at night. And what she's doing at this point is she's looking at her merchandise, what she's produced in this field and in this vineyard, and she's thinking, this has got possibilities. So her lamp doesn't go out at night. Now, she can't be working in the vineyard at night. What is she doing at night? She's planning. She's looking at her merchandise. She's saying it's good. It's profitable. So she's staying up at night and she's planning for more. As I went through this passage, there's so much in here that pertains to my own wife. I thought, if I use her every time she pops up, you're going to think this was a sermon about my wife and not about the passage. So I decided not to do that. But, and if you know my wife, you know a lot of this applies to her. But this is one thing you may not know. My wife plans everything. I mean, she has lists of just daily things she's going to do. And sometimes they're 2 pages long. So this reminds me of my wife. She's a planner. She stays up at night planning the next day of what she's going to get done. And in my wife's case, she literally makes a list. And I've seen it sometimes. It goes on for more than a page. So this is the kind of wife. Someone has said, the wife's work is never done. And all the wives said, amen. She gets up before sunrise, works into the night. And most wives could say, I identify with that. Now, verse 19 is really talking about the dish staff and her spindle. This is talking about making clothes again, and this is the way they did it. And this doesn't exist today. Rather, they'd go to the shopping mall. But again, the point is she's working hard. Day and night. She's constantly at it. Now, has she got enough to do? I mean, just ask any wife. Got to take care of the husband, got to take care of the kids, got to take care of the house. In her case, she's even taking care of her own servants. And then she goes out beyond all that and starts a business and makes money and is planning. Let me tell you what she does next. The point I'm making, she's a hard-working woman. Look at verse 20. She extends her hand to the poor. Yes, she reaches out her hand to the needy. She's not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household is clothed with scarlet. She makes tapestry for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is well known in the gate when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them and supplies the sashes for the merchants. I mean, the point, I'm lumping all these verses together under the category of she is really working hard. This is a hard working woman. But look at what these verses tell us. Verse 20 says, she extends her hand to the poor. Yea, she reaches out to the needy. In other words, she's doing all this work. She's got her own business on the side, but it's not selfish. It's not just for her. It's not just for her family. She's doing this to help other people, poor people, the needy people. So this probably has reference to her making clothes, perhaps, that she made some for them. At any rate, this woman is concerned about other people, not just people in her family. We had a hint of that when she made food for her maidservants, I should say. All right. I said at the beginning that what's said of the wife in the book of Proverbs elsewhere is applied to everybody, and this is one good case in point. And that is that this applies to the married and the single and the young and the old, that you should work hard and be concerned about other people. Paul, in the book of Ephesians, put it like this: let him that stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give to him who is in need. And that's what she's doing. She's working hard. She has a business on the side. She's making money, but she's not hoarding it. She's helping the poor and needy, which is exactly what Paul says all of us should be doing. And the book of Proverbs would echo that. Look at verse 21. She's prepared. As I said, she's organized. She's not afraid of snow for her household is clothed with scarlet. Now, she's not afraid of snow. What does that mean? She's not afraid of winter. She's not concerned that the cold weather is going to catch her unprepared. The coming of winter is not going to cause her to panic. She's prepared. And that's obvious because for her household is clothed with scarlet. So the fear of snow is not the fear of going out into it. It's the idea that snow is coming, and she's not afraid of it because she's prepared for her family to keep warm. She's clothed them with scarlet, which is probably a reference to scarlet clothing that is made out of wool. Some have suggested this is expensive garments, that she's worked, she's earned money, and she can afford the best. Matter of fact, verse 22 says she makes tapestry for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. The tapestry, the Hebrew word that's translated tapestry here, is translated spread, the idea of being bedspread in Proverbs 17:16. So that she's, again, the whole point I'm making is she's working hard. Her clothes are made of the finest linen and purple. She clothes herself in costly attire. Now, if you back up to the beginning of this chapter, which is not written by Solomon, by the way, it's talking about the queen. So some have suggested that the excellent wife is the queen, back up in verse 1. And that probably fits very well this context. So her clothing is expensive, but it would fit her position as the queen. And she's an asset to her husband. Her hard work has provided for her husband It's freed him up so he can go do things without worrying about the money in the household, or the household for that matter. So verse 23 says, her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. Now, in the ancient world, the elders ruled the city, and they met at the city gate. So verse 23 is saying something like, he's known in City Hall, and he sits with the city council. He's probably on the city council. That she has so provided for him, encouraged him, he can trust her with handling the household affairs and even the money, that he is able to go and serve the city. That's the idea. One commentator says, the industry of the wife leaves the husband free to take his place among the elders and sit in the council. Another suggests he can devote himself to public affairs without worrying about the conditions at home. Still another says, our complete management of the household affairs gives him full leisure to devote himself to the civic interests of the community. You know, I meant to look this up and I forgot. Isn't there some proverb, behind every great man is a great woman? Did I quote it right? You ever heard that? I haven't heard it lately, but he used to say it all the time. They don't say it anymore. And some of you are looking at me like, have you heard that expression? You have heard it. Did I say it right? Yeah, okay. Well, that's what this verse is saying. That because of the way she has handled the house and her husband, he's free to go serve the community. And then it says, she not only makes clothes, she sells clothes. Verse 24, she makes linen garments and sells them. She provides sashes for the merchants. This is an unbelievably creative, industrious woman. I mean, she bought a field, she bought a vineyard, she makes her own clothes, probably giving some to the poor, and now she's got so much left over, she sells them to the local merchant so he can resell them. And it says she sells sashes, which were expensive stuff. They were often costly and highly valued. This is a very interesting woman. Now, what I've said so far is she's taking care of her husband, she takes care of the household, and she's a hard worker. And most of the passage is talking about her hard work. There's nothing lazy about this gal. She's not a couch potato. Now it says something about her virtues. Look at verse 25. It says, strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and on her tongue is the law of kindness. She watches over the ways of her household, and she does not eat the bread of idleness. Now, it seems to me that these three proverbs are talking now about her character. We've talked about her conduct in the house with the husband and hard work. This is about her character. She is a strong, wise, kind woman. So verse 25 says, strength and honor are her clothing. She shall rejoice in a time to come. The word translated strength has the idea of moral character. Honor is she's dignified. She's not overburdened with care. She is a woman of joy in time to come. In verse 26, when she opens her mouth, wisdom comes out and kindness. She speaks words of wisdom to her children, to her maidservants, to her husband, and to all others. She's not doing that to impress them. She's doing that to benefit them. She speaks according to the law of kindness. And kindness means goodness, loving kindness. It's translated mercy in Proverbs 21:21. In other words, her speech is not sarcasm. It's not sanctimonious. It's sane and sensible. It's wise and gentle. She is constantly building others up at all times, in all places, in all companies. She is consistent in the way she ministers to others with her words. One has said, "This is the most distinguishing excellence of the woman. There are very few of those who are called managing women who are not lords over their husbands, tyrants over their servants, and intolerant among their neighbors. But this woman, with all of her excellence, was of a meek and quiet spirit." And yet she's actively engaged. Look at verse 27. She watches over the ways of the household and does not eat the bread of idleness. She watches over the ways of the household. She doesn't eat the bread of idleness. There's two things going on here. Have you ever heard the expression, "My mother had eyes in the back of her head"? She watches over the household. She sees things and you wondered, how in the world did she ever know that? She has eyes in the back of her head. She watches over the household. But she's not idle. She doesn't eat the bread of idleness. So she's not inactive. She's not lazy. She's not apathetic. She's engaged and energetic. She doesn't waste time. Someone has said, or engage in shallow, unproductive activity. And I read all she's doing and I'm saying, where would she ever have the time to do that? She is so busy. Now, having said all of that, what gets interesting next is this. She is praised. Now you think about all she does and all she is, and of course she would be praised. Look at verses 28, 29, and 30. Her children rise up and call her blessed, and her husband also. And he praises her. Many daughters have done well, but you exceed them all. Or look at verse 30. Charm is deceitful and beauty is passing, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Now, it seems to me that these three verses are talking about the result of the woman. So we've looked at her her conduct. She took care of the husband. She took care of the household. She had a business. She took care of the poor. She took care of her own servants. And we looked at her character, and this is the consequence. If you have that kind of conduct and that kind of character, you're going to be praised. And these three verses are saying you're going to be praised by your family and you're going to be praised by the Lord. You're going to have His praise. Look at verse 28. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her children say she is an outstanding mother. It's not unusual to hear the children of this kind of a mother say, I had the best mother in the world, which is probably the highest compliment a woman could receive. But she's also called blessed by her husband. He praises her. And listen to what he says. There are many women in the world, and there are many women who've done well. You're better than them all. How's that for a compliment? Wow. So her husband says, she's the greatest. I can't imagine a greater wife. That was what her husband said of her. One commentator said of Susanna Wesley. Susanna Wesley was the mother of John Wesley and Charles Wesley. John was the great preacher, and Charles wrote all the songs. And he said of her, she was a woman of great learning and information, of great depth of mind, of search or reach of thought, seldom to be found among the daughters of Eve, and not often among the sons of Adam. That the way he said it struck me. He's saying, you're going to not find a better mother than Susanna Wesley. But the way he said it, not among the daughters of Eve or the sons of Adam. She is just the best. Now, we get down to the end of the passage, and we're going to find the reason for these kinds of praises. Look at verse 30. Charm is deceitful. Beauty is passing. But a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Now this may be the important verse of the passage. External appearances can be deceptive. You can have charm and no common sense. And beauty, as every woman knows, is passing. But a woman may be beautiful and impractical. I remember once hearing a story. I think it was a cab driver who drove a lot of, was in an area where he drove a lot of beautiful women around. And somebody said something about that one day, and he said, yeah, they're beautiful until they open their mouth. And that's, I think, what this is saying, that you can have charm, you can charm people, you can have external beauty. As a matter of fact, I can't help but think that there is a deliberate contrast in this verse between putting the emphasis on the external and putting the emphasis on the internal. Some women, some wives, and a lot of men put the emphasis on the external, looking good. And this woman put the emphasis on being good. And there's a huge difference. And the secret was, she fears the Lord. Now, you've heard me talk about that expression as we've gone through the book of Proverbs. It means to stand in awe. It means to reverence. The idea is that you honor the Lord. And then it means to be afraid. If you step out of line, you have the fear of God in your bones. So all those little nuances are bound up in that little phrase, the fear of the Lord. But this is why she's praised. This is a godly gal. She is one who loves the Lord. He is the foundation of her life. So with all of these things that are said about this excellent woman, this excellent wife, it gets down to the bottom and it says, she's praised. She's praised by her children. She's praised by her husband. She's praised by everybody that knows her. And here's the reason. This woman knows the Lord. This woman honors the Lord. This woman is a godly woman. And that's why she gets praised even by the Lord, which is the ultimate. Whew. Wow. I'm done with the passage, but I'm not done with the sermon. I jogged through it rather rapidly because there was a lot to cover. So let me sum it up, and then I want to make some observations. One is, the sum is this. An excellent wife is extremely valuable because of what she does her husband good. She takes care of the house. She makes her own clothes. She prepares the food. She works hard. She's wise. She's kind, and consequently she's praised. Got it? This is what she does. This is who she is. And as a result, she gets praised. That sums up what this passage is saying about the woman. Having said that, I want to make some observations. And one is this. At the beginning of this message, I said that if you paid attention to the book of Proverbs, when you get to the end and you hear this, you realize that she is the embodiment of a lot of what's been said in this book that applies to everybody. I said at the beginning, if you're not a woman, you need to hear this. If you're not married, you need to hear this. Why? Because so much of what is said in this passage about the woman needs to be true of all of us. One fellow said it so well. He said, and I quote, "The virtues of a noble wife are those that are extolled throughout the book. Hard work, wise investments, good use of time, planning ahead, care for others, respect for one's spouse, ability to share godly virtues with others, wise counsel, godly fear, worship, trust, service, obedience." As Proverbs has stated repeatedly, these are the qualities that lead to honor, praise, success, personal dignity, worth, and enjoyment of life. In the face of the adulterous temptation mentioned often in Proverbs, it is fitting that the book concludes by extolling a virtuous wife. A young man and others can learn from this noble woman. By fearing God, they live wisely and righteously. This is the message of Proverbs. End of quote. I think this is really deeply significant. Matter of fact, it seems to me that from a biblical perspective, if you want to learn, if you want to grow, one of the things you have to have is an example. I think the Bible makes that very clear. Elders in a church are to be the example. There are other indications in the scripture that you need examples. Every parent who's paying attention figures out that what you're trying to teach is more caught than taught. They don't just listen to you, they mimic you. So that daughters mimic mama and sons mimic daddy. And that can be good and that can be bad. So I think it is deeply significant that at the end of the book of Proverbs, we're told about this excellent woman who is an example of what all of us should be. So I think it's strategically placed deliberately to say, this is what the wife ought to be. This is a wise, the subject of the book of Proverbs is wisdom. This is what a wise woman ought to be. A wise wife ought to be, but it's what all wise people ought to be in terms of things like hard work and wise investment and good use of time and planning and caring for other people as well as taking care of your spouse and household. Now, I have more. That's applying this passage to the book. But it's about the wife. So let me talk about the wife for a second. Proverbs 18:22 says, "He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord." So if you find a good wife, the kind we've been talking about, you have found a good thing, obtaining favor from the Lord. Wow. I think that the direct application of this passage is just that you found a good wife, that's very valuable. We started out saying that, back up in verse 10, remember that? Somebody whose name I can't pronounce, who was a philosopher from Zimbabwe, said, "A poor man with a good wife is happier than a king with a harlem." He was from Zimbabwe. But that's the point. If you found a good wife, you are one good, fortunate husband who has been blessed by the Lord. Now, I want to end by this. Couple of thoughts, very important. Remember back in verse 10, let me start on. Proverbs 18:22 says, you found something good. Proverbs 31:10 says, you found something very valuable. So this kind of a woman is good for other people, and she is very, very valuable. And that's the note I want to end on. It seems to me the passage starts with that. Who can find such a woman? Wow, if you do, that's rare, but that's worth more than rubies. So the whole point at the beginning of the passage is, this is one more valuable woman. Now, how valuable is that? Years ago, I came across the monetary value of the work of a wife. And I tucked it away, and I don't recall ever having used it. As a matter of fact, I think I filed it away on Proverbs 31, and I've never spoken on this passage, and I dug it out, and here is what a wife was worth in 1981. You ready for this? Her monetary value at home is this. Her services include chauffeur, gardener, family counselor, maintenance worker, cleaning woman, housekeeper, cook, house bookkeeping, budget manager, interior decorator, carpenter, dietitian, secretary, public relations, and hostess. The values of her services are, this is 1981. The value of her services are, combining all those services, $785.70 a week, or $40,823.64 a year. So, in 1981, this kind of a woman would have been worth $41,000 a year in round figures. By the way, in 1970, the average income was $10,000 a year. So a few years later, it was probably more, but it wasn't $40,000. This is one valuable woman. But I wondered, what would she be worth today? So I found a calculator on the internet. If inflation is 2.84%, the $40,823.64 in 1981 would be worth what in 2020? Would you care to guess? I'll tell you, $116,730.46. She's worth almost $117,000. Is this a valuable woman or what? Now, I have one more thing to say. I want to underscore how valuable this is. In 1 Peter chapter 3, Peter tells a wife who's married to an unbeliever how she should conduct herself in order to win him, that she may win him to Christ. And here's what he says, among other things. Do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging of the hair, the wearing of gold, the putting on of apparel. Rather, let it be the hidden person of the heart, with the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. It seems to me that that's really grappling with what Solomon said, and Solomon didn't write this passage, by the way, but what the Proverbs say in chapter 31, that the emphasis is on inward beauty, not outward beauty. Peter says the exact same thing, 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 3 and 4. But I didn't read you the whole passage. Verse 4 ends by saying, which is very precious in the sight of God. This kind of a person, not just this kind of a woman or a wife, this kind of a person is very valuable. Not just in the eyes of their children or their spouse or their neighbor, but in the sight of God. That, I say, should motivate us to emulate the example of an excellent wife. Father, thank you for giving us your word that spells out so clearly what you expect. But Father, thank you for giving us in your word examples of what we should and should not be and do. And thank you for giving us those living examples among us to see how this really works in flesh. And then, Lord, I pray that you would give us the grace to be that kind of a person. In Jesus' name, amen.